أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وتوكل على الحي الذي لا يموت وسبح بحمده وكفى به بذنوب عباده خبيرا الذي خلق السماوات والأرض الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وما بينهما في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش الرحمن فاسأل به خبيرا. وإذا قيل لهم اسجدوا للرحمن قالوا وما الرحمن وإذا قيل لهم اسجدوا للرحمن قالوا وما الرحمن قالوا وما الرحمن أنسجد لما تأمرنا وزادهم نفورا. تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا. وهو الذي جعل الليل والنهار خلفة لمن أراد أن يذكر أو أراد شكورا. وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض عونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض عونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما صدق الله العظيم.
السلام عليكم. نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على حبيبنا وسيدنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. Welcome to everybody. Shukran Shaykh Hendricks for a beautiful qiraat and for the nasheeds and I will do a formal welcome. Hopefully I get 10 out of 10. Minus 2. So give me a few minutes, 10 minutes, maximum 15 minutes, and then we'll hand it over to Shaykh Seraj. This is a formal welcome. As Muslims, we are bearers of the final message to mankind. And it is imperative, or we are duty bound, to uphold the standards of knowledge, preserve the standards, and to even increase on what we have, so that we may productively add and create positivity in our society and communities. And if we lower the standards of knowledge, we then add to the stagnation and crippling of any society. It's important. Knowledge is, the first verse reveals Iqra, read, and the response is not the response is humility. So we pray that in our search for knowledge, we uphold the standards for knowledge as we are trying to do with Islamic texts, and at the same time increasing humility. And a lot of thought went into Islamic text. Islam, what is Islam? Submission to Allah, submission to the truth, submission to the reality. And one of the truths is that we are human beings before we are Muslims. And I say that because we one and all, regardless of beliefs, have one thing in common, and that is that Adamiyya, Adamic roots, that we are all from Adam, that he is our father. Regardless of where we come from and what we believe in, every single human being has Nabi Adam alayhi salam as our father. And we are also one ummah, one nation, one people, one civilization. And if you look at the word ummah, we can say it comes from the word from mother, because we have one mother in Sayyidina Hawa. We have one father, we have one mother. So after that we may differ in our beliefs, but we are one, and that's universal. And it's important in maintaining the standards of knowledge that we concentrate on the universals and not argue about the specifics, like the length of our beards and the shortness of our trousers, and if toothpicks are halal or not, which we've seen toothpicks being argued about. And each and every single human being is sacred because we have that sacred breath flowing into us, that ruh, that spirit. And the angels did not prostrate to the clay, but they prostrated to the ruh flowing into Nabi Adam alayhi salam. And each and every human being is a bearer of that ruh, that sacred spirit, that blessed breath, which makes every single human being sacred. And we notice in Sahih Bukhari, you can check in the Kitab al-Janazah, the Prophet standing up for a funeral, and they assume that the Prophet does not know that it's a Jew, and he says, when they ask him, why do you stand up for a Jew, he says, Alaysat nafsahu, is it not a soul, is it not a ruh? Because he saw the human being as divine potential. He saw the human being as sacred, and that ruh transcends Christianness and Jewishness, it's sacred. And firstly, in the spirit of the sacred, in the spirit of fitra, in the spirit of humanness, we invite you and welcome you here today, Shaykh Seraj. That's the first welcome. So I'm aiming for the 10 out of 10. That's the first one. If I don't get 10 out of 10, then next time I'm not going to happen. I have to get 11 the next time. I'm hoping I'm at 5. So. And hopefully if I say something funny, everybody's going to laugh. Secondly, when the Byzantine Empire, when the kings, when those, whatever we want to call them, the Sultan, when concern grew for Islam spreading in Medina, they deployed 2 envoys of the best to see what's happening in Medina. And when they arrived in Medina, the place was deserted. They saw nothing and nobody except for a blacksmith who was preparing some swords and some arrows, sheathing some arrows. And they asked him, why are these stores, the markets deserted? If this was where we live, we would have raided everything here and stolen all the goods. And they said the entire city is behind the Prophet, they are all praying with him. And they asked this man, why do you not pray with the Prophet then? Since you are preparing his swords and arrows, why not pray with him? And he says, I'm not Muslim. And they asked him, why do you prepare the swords and why do you sheathe these arrows for someone who do not believe in? And the response is that I would sheathe 1,000 swords to see one smile on his face. And that is love. So my second welcome is a bit irrational. I mean, when Majnoon kissed the wall, and I asked him why you kissed the wall, he says Layla touched this wall, so I kissed the wall. And when he looked after the dog, they asked him why do you look after the dog. He said it's not the dog, it's because she was in his vicinity once, and that's sufficient for me to care for this dog. So call me Majnoon, we welcome you in the name and the spirit of love, that's what we talk. So hopefully I have a 7 or 8 now. Escalate. Okay, thirdly, third welcome and the final welcome. And I have to give an example for this. When a certain man entered the Masjidul, and he greeted in a rather different style of greeting, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. He repeated everything twice, instead of once. And one of the fuqaha of Medina was Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri. He was a foremost jurist of Medina. Noticed and heard this man's somewhat strange greeting. Asked him, where are you from? And he says, I'm from Iraq. And he asks him, and he tells him, I've never heard of such a greeting. And he responds, I've heard this from Nafi, he heard it from Ibn Umar, he heard it from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He didn't tie his son of the chain of transmission. And Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri replies, he says, La araftu, I don't know about this. I have no idea about this. And he asks him, Hafidtu al-hadith Rasulullah kulluhu, and you memorized all the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a stranger from Iraq asking the jurist of Medina, have you memorized all the hadith of the Prophet? And he says, no, I have not memorized all the hadith. And he says, he responds to the jurist, Thuluthay, have you memorized a third at least? And Ibn Shihab says, no, there's no way I could have memorized 2/3. And he asks him, well, nisfuhu, have you memorized half of the hadith literature? And surprisingly, Ibn Shihab says, yes, I've memorized half of the entire hadith literature of the Prophets. I know half of the hadith. And this Iraqi tells him, well, good, take this new hadith you heard from me and place it in the half which you do not know yet anything of. It ends his Fadahika, Ibn Shihab laughed about this. There is no way that that Ibn Abbas and Ibn Mas'ud thought alike, and that they gave the same fatwas. They gave different fatwas depending on what they heard from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And they dispersed into different cities, and they transformed the environments and the places they were in according to the way in which their own souls acquired and reflected the Prophet way. And this is part of the legacy of the Salaf, this difference. So the Prophet said, my Sahaba are stars, and whichever of those stars you follow, you'll be rightly guided. Indicating in this hadith that there will be differences. We will differ now, and the best of creation, the best of the followers of the Prophet, they had differences, but this was. So in the spirit of filling our other half, we welcome and invite you here today, our beloved Shaykh Seraj, and hopefully I get 10 out of 10.
That timing issue is high. So you say 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Because let me listen to more jokes. Inshallah, that half minute look as good as you are. We shall try and you could well have done this job yourself today. Alhamdulillah, shukran for inviting me. Really is a great pleasure to be here. Alhamdulillah. And to everyone else who organizes the Lexical site and here the influence of receiving Hussein Brahma, musical abilities. It was first time today, so I don't talk much about it. Quite a star. Inshallah ta'ala, the topic that I've been asked to speak about is the Sunnah of the deen. And that sort of mystifies some people when it comes to certain aspects of the Muslim in the first place. We have become a community, unfortunately, that's rather exoteric in our very exteriorized in the things that we think about, ways in which we do things, and the way in which we understand things. And that is what Sidi Ali Khalqi early on referred to as, you know, what are your ideas and about this and about the length of our pearls and all sorts of things. And in fact, we castigate them, and the person's beards are long enough. If you find some people who absolutely, totally refuse to perform salah behind him, regardless of the fact that there's not a single classical Arabic text or any other text that exists in the history of faith that says that having a beard is a fard or even sunnah of the salah. And that is how seriously this version is. It speaks about aura, it speaks about cleanliness, it speaks about najas, all of these things need to be in place before we perform the salah. Not a single alim or scholar in the entire history of Islam has made that a shart or a condition or a word of the salah, not even a hiya of the salah. So you've got to be careful, people, in terms of how we reconstruct and reimagine things that we consider to be part of our intrinsicity of Islam. And this is a particular problem. And so I find that there is a need to familiarize ourselves with, number one, with the fundamentals and with the principles of things. And once we have familiarized ourselves with those fundamentals and principles, we attempt to understand them. Okay? And that's essential to our progress in anything, whether it's a religion, whether it's anything else. Okay? And once you have, particularly Islam, and this is where the divergence comes, so many other models, so many other theoretical systems, and so on and so forth, whether academic or otherwise. And that is to internalize these things. And it is that at the level of internalization that we find things falling apart. And this is so crucial for us to understand. What I will do is to engage very quickly into a few definitions of Sunnah. Because when we speak about Sunnah, do we know what is speaking about? If I ask you what is the Sunnah, what is the meaning of Sunnah? What? I'm not examining it, but I'm asking answers. Okay, so don't worry. I'm just asking the question rhetorically. That if we speak about Sunnah, do we know what? And I've done a whole series of this at the Jummahs, the past few months. What do we speak about? A person tells you this is not the Sunnah, that's not the Sunnah. Now, if I'm speaking as a fakir, for example, as a fakir, and I tell you what you've done there is a Sunnah of the Prophet, in the Salah, for example, or it's not a Sunnah. Then I'm speaking as a fakir. Because all of these terms have been worked out, okay, quite carefully, across the centuries. And we need to understand what the differences are when we speak about any of these terms, whether it is fiqh, whether it is sunnah, whether it's wajib, whether it's fard. We need to distinguish between and understand these words in as much as they have lexical implications, meanings, denotations, and connotations, and in as much as they have technical meanings. And this is point number one where we fail hopelessly. We have not defined our terms correctly. The first thing is to define it is, get a definition of it. Anything, tabayyan. What is tabayyan? The Quran exhorts us often to tabayyan. Shed light on things, clarify things before you go into it, before you go. You delve into things, clarify them, and so on and so forth. Now, in Sayyid Muhammad al-Wali's Manahil al-Irfan, or the type, he gives 4 definitions of Sunnah. Okay? And all 4 of these definitions in the Sunnah, as he narrates in this particular book of his, are written. And this is what you need to think about. Okay? And then he distinguishes between Sunnah as being a Sunnah filugha, which means a sira or hasana, a kamil qabih. That Sunnah could be a way of life that you lead, a part of way of being. That is either good or it's bad. It's sound or it's corrupt. Sunnah can be either of them. That's in the language, that is in the Lexical. When it comes to the istilahi meaning, I'll show you the relevance of how this leads up to what we mean when we speak about the Sunnah as a way of being, a way of becoming. that is exceptionally important for us to understand. And first of all, in terms of it as, being in its lexical meaning, the Prophet often used it, the term Sunnah, in its lexical meaning. And that's where some people they make catastrophic mistakes when they try to make us understand what the Prophet meant when he spoke about the Sunnah. Because the Sunnah does not only apply to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Sunnah also applies to Allah. There is the Sunnah to refer to so often in the Quran. And then there is the Sunnah of Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sunnah is a wide generic term that covers so much. And unfortunately, there is so little that we come to know. When we speak about it in its lexical meaning, because it cannot be understood any other way. In this particular hadith, من سن في الإسلام سنة الإسلام حسنة فله أجرها وأجر من عمل بها بعده. Those of you who invent a new sunnah, okay? من سن في الإسلام سنة حسنة. Those of you who invent a sunnah that is beautiful or productive or useful, then you will have the benefit of that sunnah and the benefit of all those who follow you and come after you and who benefit from that sunnah and who perpetuate that sunnah. Okay? However, on the other, and no one will be losing out on anything. The fact that we're using sunnah that one that doesn't diminish the risk, in fact it increases the thawab that you get. However, he says, وَمَنْ سَنَّ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ سُنَّةً سَيِّئَةً. Hadith sahih, that's in Muslim, for example. How do we understand this? That there is a sunnah that we can categorize as sayyah, as bad, as corrupt. And this is where the conundrum is. People tell you this is not a sunnah, that's a sunnah. This is this. What are you talking about? The first thing I want to know from you is, what are you talking about? What is your definition? You're telling me that's a sunnah to wear my thumb, what's a 3/4 of my shin, and beard, sort of, they're using certain cups in Afghanistan also to measure, and it doesn't measure up to the cup, and you can't read the salah kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with wearing beard suit and stuff like that. But the Zahir became so infuriated with the people focusing on the exteriors of things. It's beautiful to wear it. It's got nothing about I love it. You're so beautiful. I really do. Okay? But I'm Shafi, you can put sunnah. Cut off like that. You look in any Shafi things. I'm not making fun of this. It is true. That is the sunnah. You don't need to grow the sideburns and stuff like that. You still got Habib Ali Jifri, Habib Umar, Hafi, all of those people, Dad, Mustafa. If you want to know their opinion of sunnah of the beard, it's that. That's sunnah by them. Okay? That's a minimum requirement. So there's a lot of debate about beards and about thobes and about things and about amamas and not or whatever it is. But people is that we call our focus. And this is what we need to ask ourselves. Because once we become external, I'm going to look at each one of you qualify, you're beard, you couldn't have decided this Quran, can you see the ranges here? Ranges are one of our mu'adhins. I'm not going to come. You make a run, I'm not going to come. And this happens in the religions. Unfortunately, people, it happens. And my brother and I wanted to fall to the ground for 1 year. The Azhar's journal comes to us. And there was Dr. Shalabi's brother, who we didn't know had visited that part of the world. And the first thing he asked was a question there, and they talked about the foremost usul in the world, usul. Okay? And one of the brothers was our teacher, and he was clean shaven, Egyptian chap. And his brother wrote a scathing article about it, because they didn't want to follow him in the grace that he was. They didn't want to follow him. He first of all asked, where's the Imam, why is it the came in? The second night, why is it? Third night, one of the chaps came up to him and said, look, sorry, he says that we reached this sort of a taqiyya going on here, this simulation. We're not supposed to follow you, but just, the Rahman as one of you, as one of our guests, he's from Islam, he repeated after his own. There's a man who's a gas. He wrote about this. People crowded around us, asked us, what sort of Muslims are they in South Africa? I said, look, we talked about the North, we are not. South Africa's quite a large country, kind of thing, please. I mean, subhanAllah, he castigated. He said, you people are worrying about beards and about youth, these things, and I've gone into the black Zulu areas and the pest areas, and you're nowhere near those people. You are nowhere near your pest to help them and this and that, and to spread the word of Islam and to assist them. Please stop about them. You are obsessed here, you little cocoons. About beards and about dates of these things and our moms and our long and I'm never a black man, I'm a Shia kind of thing. And that is nice, isn't it? That is how, how difficult things become. But the moment you exteriorize things, then you find yourself in problem. Why? What happens? And this is so important. What happens when you exteriorize? When you exteriorize, you start to look at people. Is it not so? Who are you, and what are you doing? Even in the Salah, for example, one guy could tell me after Maghrib, that guy was standing with his feet too close and not. How the devil, you standing on this side of the Salah, that chap is standing on the other side. Your focus is supposed to be on your sujood place, but you're telling me about how that chap got like 20 people down the line at the Zawiya, how that he stood with his feet together. Where were you looking? I mean, this sort of thing. And this is what this culture, that's just a life, this is what this culture generates. So you come out and you think that you're about it. You come out and you start the fitna. This is the problem. You see? And this is a serious, a very, 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 very serious problem. So the first thing that we need to do is to get our definitions right. That's point number one. Islam demands objectivity. And I gave a talk, I delivered a paper at my son here was also there, University of Free State. I delivered a paper on Islamic education, and stuff like that. And one of the issues I mentioned was the important, we discussing objectivity. Objective. How can we be objective? Are we supposed to? How can I be both objective and criticizing the Sunnah and yet have faith, for example? This sort of thing. And we can clearly distinguish between the two. Why? Because Allah Ta'ala does. When it comes to my private faith, my iman, Allah Ta'ala has got nothing to do with it. You can't fit that. When it comes to how I present my deen, it's got everything to do with me and you and everyone else. How? In terms of objectivity. Are we objective in the first place? In defining things, looking at them, and then commenting? Or are we emotional freaks who, froth at the mouth, and death to America, and death to this, and death to everyone else, and death to, except myself? that becomes the perspective. How objective are we, for example, in terms of not as a scholar that I do not from Sidi Ali that there is an objective paper, or from him, or Gerard, objective paper, or anyone of you here. How objective am I in a Muslim executing my role as a Muslim on this dunya? Under the guidance, because the very first way in which the Quran, the very first term the Quran uses to establish its identity as a divine book is Hudan as a guidance. Not as a textbook to be studied. Yes, elsewhere it can be, but as a Huda. That is the very first. And what is Huda? Huda is guidance. And what is guidance? Guidance is based on what? Not just knowledge, but wisdom. So there is a cumulative effect here. When I read the Quran, do I read it just as a word, the Huda guidance for you, it's not for me kind of thing, I mean, that's so wrong. But let me just pose one question. When we are attacked by the media and attacked by this, and there's so many people becoming Muslim or Wahid, I mean, running a person coming from Iraq, a Dutch journalist walked me, didn't even know my name, he went down to the ANC and they sent him up to me, and the man embraced Islam. He hardly knew anything, he could not understand injustice. One of the problems is this. Forget him. Let us look at ourselves and how we comment on other people. Well, Allah Ta'ala tells us, and the kind of degree of objectivity Allah Ta'ala asks us, demands us. And don't think that this is separated from the fashion of Sunnah as a way of being. It's got everything to do with Sunnah as a way of being. And I will sort of do it in a more sort of less random fashion. Earlier on, I'm just introducing the subject. من الواقع tells us لا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. Do not allow the hatred of another people to cause you to swerve from justice. Be just. That is closer and nearer to Allah. So I'm not Muslim, and I start insulting and saying, and those Muslims, they just think that they're mad, they caricature Prophet in cartoons and they do all. This is hatred. We are not allowed, unfortunately, I would say, we're not allowed to recaricature and throw Nabi Isa because otherwise I'm kafir. So we can't do what they do, But we have the high moral ground because of it. And sometimes we don't understand that. But now, what happens is people go out on the roads and they burn books and they burn churches. Has happened in Pakistan and elsewhere. They tear down things. Is that adalah? Is that the way in which Allah Ta'ala wants us to respond to challenges? We Allah Ta'ala clearly tells us in the Quran, La yajrimannakum shan'an. It's a very harsh word. Shana'anukum, anyone here who understands that will know. Shana'anukum is a very, very strong word of intense hatred, of rancor. It's an intense word. Don't allow the hatred, the hostility, the rancor, the belligerence of other people to cause you as Muslims to swerve from justice. Be just in the way in which you respond. That requires that you have undergone transformation within yourself. You see the importance of that? And how many of us are responding in that? Very few of us. Because we are reading words. We have externalized Islam to a point where it's going to clack out there. It's going to die of a chill of sorts. It's going to freeze. Because it's so far from the warmth of our hearts and our souls and our spirits. Why? Because we have not succeeded and we have, in fact, at times refused to internalize this beautiful deen of ours. And that's one of the problems that we have. That the lack of ability to identify the fundamentals and principles in Islam, the inability to understand those fundamental principles in Islam, let alone internalize those understandings that we need. And in this way, Islam is transformed world history, people. Not just me and you sitting here and listening to the beauty of, well, not my beauty, but I mean of the prophets of Allah. This great human being, accredited by non-Muslims as being one of the greatest human beings that ever lived and ever existed, in this lifespan of ours, in this time span of ours across the millennia. He changed the people who were barbers. How did he do it? By slitting their throats? By taking revenge? What did he say when he walked into Makkah after the Fatih Makkah? And how did the Fatih take place? Because Bani Bakr was one of the mushrikeen, they resided in Makkah, they signed on the part of the Prophet that they in that treaty, that they would form a part, that they sided with the Prophet, because they were the minority and they were being oppressed by the bigger tribes in Makkah. Mushrik. What happened? 2 years down the line, they break the treaty. In which way? There was a complete agreement that Bani Bakr would be left alone. Mushrik tribe. Okay? There was complete agreement, much to the chagrin of people like Sayyidina Umar and the whole host of others. There was complete agreement that the mushrikeen in Medina would be allowed, in the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the mushrikeen would be allowed, if they wanted to leave Medina, to return to Makkah, and the Prophet agreed. There was complete agreement that if the Muslims in Makkah wanted to leave Medina, that would not be allowed. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, when he heard that, he unsheathed his sword. And he said, we're going to stand for this, we're more than them, we can kill them right now. And the Prophet said to him, keep quiet, shut up, keep quiet. I'm doing this treaty of these people. The humanity of this man and the wisdom of this man is absolutely incredible. 2 years down the line, they start something occurred in Makkah, and they started persecuting the Bani Bakr. One of them slipped out, ran up to Medina, informed the Medina. In those days, it took about 2 weeks to get from Makkah to Medina on camelback or horseback. They informed the Prophet, and he rallied the Muslim forces in defense of a mushrik tribe to open Makkah and the greatness, and this is written in all of our historical texts. There's not even a doubt about, would we do that today? You see, we've got to ask ourselves these fundamental questions. How did justice manifest itself within the greatness of this human being who we call Muhammad? And he is Muhammad on earth. He is the praised one. Why is he the praised one? And they conquered Makkah. And there were people who were persecuted, who were buried in the ground and up to their necks and thrown with honey thrown over their heads and eaten. And God, it's something unbelievable in humanity overall. When they ate away at their heads and their ears and they feasted on him. That's where they died. The way Sumaya died is, as I mentioned in Jummah's, I can't even mention it yet. You can't mention it. It's still horrific. She was the first martyr in Islam on top of it, and women should be proud of this. These are the people you walk into. And when you ask them, what do you think that I will be doing to you today? And then they said, you're the Rasul Karim, Ibn Karim, your Rasul was noble, the son of a noble person. And he said to them, Antum Atulakarium, all of you are free today. Not even our TRC, which is an amazing job that we did here, can compare with what he said there. Not even the Nuremberg trials in which the Germans are still being hunted, the Nazi hunters and all sorts of things. Some of them were persecuted, some of them were killed afterwards, were executed because of their brutality. None of these happened except for 2 or 3 people who were really they asked for it. Out of the hundreds and the thousands of them who had mercilessly killed Muslim men and women. And this is what he says to them, we've got to understand, as Imam Ghazali says, one of the most important, after we first understand Tawheed, we've got to understand the ilm nubuwwah, number one. We can read about the seerah, we can read about what he did yesterday, the day before, and the day after, and how it was. But have we understood properly what precisely constitutes prophethood? What kind of qualities do we need to have? And when we speak about the emulation of the Prophet, what do we speak about? We can't emulate the Prophet. And in every book we find that it's okay. That one of our pursuits in life, and our best in life, is in fact to emulate the Prophet. How can your life emulate it? In what way? Show me one single human being who has been able to do that. Let us just get back to the hadith and get into the meat of what I want to say. Because I'm not going to keep you too long, people. According to all the scholars in the world, we have that lexical meaning, and we also the Prophet said that will come a time that تَتَّبِعُنَّ سُنَّ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ شِبْرًا بِشِبْرٍ. That's the length of shibr from my finger to there. That's shibran b'shibrin. You will follow them, step by step. In other words, وَذِرَاءً بِذِرَاءٍ, the from here up until here, that length. حَتَّى لَوْ دَخَلُوا فِي خُجْرِ ضَبٍّ لَتَبْتُمُوهُمْ. Even if they go into a lizard's hole, you will follow them into the lizard's hole. So this is what he's saying. لَتَبِعُنَّ سُنَنًا. You will follow a sunnah. It's in the bad sense. It's in a negative sense. Okay? That is in the Sharia. That is in its lexical meaning. And we'll get back to that meaning. Just remember that. However, the sunnah is also in the Sharia. As it is defined by whom? A whole host of specialists within Islam. Okay? And the ulama have differed in many ways with regards to this definition, purely because they need to get a correct understanding of what they are speaking about and of what they are interpreting. What are we doing? We are looking at the text in the Quran. You open the Quran, you're looking at the text of the Quran. You've got to interpret that text. Is it not so? It's as simple as this. Just think about the process. You've got to open the hadith literature, Sahih Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, all the Vatdal, Qutni, and so on and so forth. And you've got to interpret those things. How do you interpret? What is your point of departure? How do you start with objectivity? How do you collate all this information? What do you do with it? You've got to understand the definition. And that is why these scholars have done, and we do not need to reinvent this wheel, they've done so much, we can add to it. But we cannot be pointless trying to invent this wheel, as some of these so-called modernists and some of these so-called Salafis are trying to do today. Reinvent the wheel. And they talk rubbish. Because they're trying to reinvent the wheel, and they're building on this great legacy that we have. This is the problem. So, each one of them, as Sayyid Muhammad says here, there are many definitions. And he says here in his work, وَالسَّبَبْ فِي ذَلِكَ اِخْتِلَافُ مَقَاصِدِ الْقُلُوبِ. You see, these are wise people talking. They're not talking from the hawa. He says that the reason for the ikhtilaf, for the difference of definitions that we find for Sunnah, is because of the maqasid. They have seen the purposes. If you cannot see the purpose of the entire of where you want to go to, and any professional will say that, how can you determine the steps that you need to evolve and to focus on before you get there? The same thing happens, in the Quran, the Sunnah, and in the Sharia. Except that our standards have dropped to such a dismal level that we think that if I make a dua, that is fake. Or it's tawheed. I mean, there's a crisis of standards, people, when it comes to how we understand our deen. A complete crisis of understanding. So it depends on the maqasid and the particular subject that you're addressing. And what do you set out to represent? Or to expound, in a particular field or any aspect of Islam. And Islam is so multifaceted, people. I mean, it is awe-inspiring in the manner in which it is, multifaceted. It's quite amazing, okay? And that's what it says. So the ulama hadith, they say, for example, أن كل ما أضيف إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أو إلى الصحابي. That's what listen carefully how the muhaddithin do this. They say everything that the Prophet did, Maudif is to the Prophet and what the ashab did. Listen very carefully. Okay? أو صحابي. Okay? أو إلى من دونه قولا. Or a tabi, for example. Or fi'lan, or taqreeran, or siftan. And everything that relates to their speech, what they say, to what they do, to what they agree to, the tacit approval, and also the physical descriptions. Okay? How they look, both khilqiyatan and khuluqiyatan. Both in terms of the khilqa, the physical appearance, and also the khuluq, the akhlaq. That is the definition of muhaddithun. Now bear in mind, people, number one, we are talking about Sunnah, that the word according to Shafi'i in particular, that the opinion of a Sahabi is not binding on us. If I quote to you a Sahabi, Ibn Umar said so, it's not binding on me. I have the right to go to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud's opinion, I have got the right to go to Abdullah ibn Abbas, otherwise it is catastrophic, people. If we think that something was binding upon ourselves, and do you know how the Sahaba differ, people? Do you know the few things upon which they had ijma on, consensus on? It's very little. To the point where the mother of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, they only accept the ijma of the Sahaba and no one else besides them. No one else besides them. They don't accept some things such as ijma of the ulama because they can't get, it's impossible to collect all the information over the centuries. The Hanbali Madhab only, they cut the cut line is at the Sahaba when it comes to matters of ijma. Imam Shafi says, no, we can't. So we can all go ahead and Qurban chickens then on a day in terms of the opinion of Abdullah ibn Abbas. Nice, great. And while others disagree with that. So whose opinion is whose? Is binding kind of thing. Now Shaykh said because of all the differences, it's not. As for the ulama of the usul fiqh, for example, يعرفونها بأنها سيد محمد كل ما صدر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم غير القرآن الكريم. Everything that emanated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam other than the Quran. other than the Quran of what? من قول أو فعل أو تقرير. Of what he said, of what he did, or تقرير, of what he had approved. مما يصلح أن يكون دليلا لحكم شرعي. This is the problem. That which qualifies as a dalil for a hukm shari. Now, do you know what that requires? For that hadith to qualify as a dalil for anything, it's amazing, people. I mean, I can give an entire lecture just on that facet of the Sunnah of the Prophet. Okay? But bear in mind that وموضوع عنايتهم البحث عن الأدلة الشرعية, and the subject of their concern are the adillah. What makes something wajib? In fact, what makes something ironically, paradoxically, a sunnah in the deen? What makes it fard? What renders it a hay'ah? It depends on how it is framed by the Prophet. How do I know that takbiratul ihram, for example, is a wajib in the Quran? Like, Allahu Akbar is wajib. I have to produce the deletes. But when it comes to the when it comes to what we say, what do we say when in our ruku? Subhanallah. Right, what is that? What's the hukum on that? Fard? Sunnah? You see, I'm just don't force you to I don't want to answer I just want to demonstrate the things. It's a sunnah by Shafi, and it's a even by others in the Shafi. It's fard by Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So what do we do about this? You have to go engage in fiqh muqarran, compare the fiqh. But whether I say it's fard, another person says sunnah, whether none will discourage you from saying it, because there's fight in it. There's a benefit in it. But the one, according to his or her ijtihad, has decided, look, according to the evidence available to me, I declare that a fard. According to the evidence available, I declare that sunnah. And we find all sorts of people, getting into the many and just talking rubbish about the whole thing. Whereas they themselves have demonstrated how Muslims should interface one with the other in the face of ikhtilaf, of differences of opinion. For example, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, if a little bit of blood sort of, if you scratch your finger here, a little bit of blood pours out here kind of thing, it doesn't break the wudu. Ahmad ibn Hanbal was a student, a little bit of blood there, breaks the wudu. So they are sitting in the haram, and he gets up and said, Imam Shafi was a very nakhif, thin person, very weak physically, kind of thing. Imam Malik was a 6'7" giant kind of thing. Imam Shafi was a very sort of thin, frail person, not very healthy, physically strong person. And he forces himself up to get up. And what he does is he licks his finger and he looks up and the scratch either Muslim eminence, either Guru or Asr. And what he does is he takes a bit of dust and he wipes it and he salats. Meanwhile, the students of Ahmad Hanbal was also with him in the class, because after that they would leave and then they would go to Ahmad Hanbal's classes. I mean, so the people of humility. He was a mujtahid mutlaq and yet the student of Imam Shafi. Imam Shafi is a mutlaq mujtahid, remained the student of Imam Mahdi. This was the humility of these people. So anyway, they trekked off and they went home with him. Now look at this. He says, and they stop him and be concerned and say, look, you taught us the little bit of blood and licking the blood, for example, breaks the salah. So how can we follow? Why didn't you tell Imam Shafi that you can't leave the salah? His answer was quite simple. He said, Kayfa la usalli wa Imam Shafi. How can I not perform a salah behind that man? Can you see? Because he knows what he's done is based on his ijtihad. The same thing happened in Iraq when Imam Shafi got up there. He performed subuh and he didn't perform the qunut. Abu Hanifa says it shouldn't be done. Abu Hanifa tells him to perform the qunut, that your salah is batil. Is it not so? So what does he do? He doesn't perform the qunut, or they think he forgot the qunut, and they say subhanallah, and he refused to listen. They say subhanallah, and he refused to listen. he said, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. I turned around, and one of the people said, Ya Shaykh, I mean, you we said, SubhanAllah, we are the students of Abu Hanifa, of the late Abu Hanifa, because he was passed already. So we just respect it to you, SubhanAllah. And again, his answer was, how can I perform the qunut and that man's qabr is close to where I'm performing the salah? I will abandon my ijtihad in favor of the greatness of that man lying there. You see the difference here? And we kill each other over little. There was a Hanafi Shafi conflict in Cape Town which was abominable in the 1800s, for example. Imam Shafi both Imam Shafi and Malik woken up and slept in the graves, they probably booked all of us, Hanafis and Shafis. Those of us who claim to be Hanafis and those Shafis. You see, that is the spirit in which they receive each other's ijtihad. We've got to understand these things, people. Okay? So what your Usuliyin do is they look at those aspects of the dalils. Is it strong enough? Not? And then they debate in a very sort of academic way and a very objective way about what constitutes Sunnah and what does not constitute a Sunnah. And that Sunnah must be based on what? On the action of the Prophet, on the word of the Prophet, or on what he approved in company. Okay? The ulama fiqh, how do they, apart from the Sunnah, what do the fuqaha say about Sunnah? The fuqaha say, and I'm going to go quickly from my words, the fuqaha say, they say that Sunnah is the opposite of wajib. That's all. That's all they say. And the thing is either fard or it's a Sunnah, it's the opposite. Then they wait for the Usuli to come up with the dalils, and then they decide based on their investigation, their research, that act, if you keep your hand like this, in the salah is either Sunnah, it's a fard, it's a hayah. And they will give all the dalils produced by the Usuliyin, and with their own ijtihad they will declare that's a Sunnah or a fard. It's the opposite of fard. Sunnah, that's all that it is. As opposed to the Mu'adh, for example, the missionaries and these people, they include a whole host of issues. They see it as the opposite of the bid'ah and all of these things, and they include, as Sayyid Muhammad puts here, هي مرادفة الحديث النبوي عندهم, okay, and so on and so forth. وهو أي الحديث يشمل أيضا صفات النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الخلقية والخلقية. They include all the sifat of the Prophet. And they speak about the Prophet because they want to present him to the people. And that's how they see the Sunnah. But none of them, none of these wa'ad could proclaim any of what they say about the Prophet in terms of how he looked, in terms of how he behaved, the way he walked, the way he cut his apples and his oranges, and the way he cut that these are Sunnah. A Sunnah of buying date. Okay? Not a single one of them is. This thing about introducing Sunnah as a validated salah today is one of the biggest bid'ahs on the planet. I mean, and this is the irony of it all. In fact, they don't even realize that those people speak about these Sunnahs as, like not having ears, not being able to read salah or recite Quran, tilawatan, and tilawatan. They've accepted these categories of Sunnah, the Usul, the Fuqaha, which in itself is a bid'ah. Because these categories didn't exist during the time of the Prophet. That emerged because of a whole host of other issues. So we come to what? To the lexical meaning of the Sunnah. And that's how we need to receive the Sunnah. We look at the lexical meaning, and all of them, including this is Shaykh, colleague of ours, Sayyid Hashim Arifai, who was a former Minister of Culture of Iraq, of Kuwait before it got blown apart by Iraq and all that nonsense and stuff like that happened. And of course by Imam Malik, Sayyid Muhammad al-Malik, etc., etc. All of them concurring. Shaykh al-Amrawi in Morocco, Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad, Shaykh Abdul Hakim al-Karim Murad, who have written brilliant works on these issues of bid'ah and of Sunnah. And when we look at Sunnah as a way of being, we've got to look at the Sunnah as the tariqah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. As it says, السنة في لغة العرب والشرع هي الطريقة. Sunnah in the lexical meaning of Arabic language, and in the Shar, its lexical meaning, here at-tariqah. It's the way. It's the way of the Prophet. Okay? وَهِيَ هُدَى الرَّسُولِ صلى الله عليه وسلم. And that is the guidance of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And how did that guidance manifest itself? It manifested itself in the way in which he gave his guidance to people, how he treated people. Remember that a lot of what is constituted, a lot of what is related within the Quran eminently belong to the category of the Sunnah of the Prophet in the aspect of the way in which he was, what he was, and how he interfaced with people. Remember that. When Allah Ta'ala says, Inna wa innaka la'ala khuluqin azim, is referring to his Sunnah. You must not forget that, people. When the Quran says, Ya Rasulullah, innaka la'ala khuluqin azim, it's amazing. The rhetoric of this is amazing. Muhammad, innaka la'ala, you are at the place of the highest standard of character, on the most exalted standard of character. It is his Sunnah. When Allah Ta'ala says, Udu ila sabila rabbika bil hikmati wal mawidati al hasana wa jadilhum billati hiya ahsan, and so on and so forth, invite to the way of Allah Ta'ala with wisdom and beautiful argumentation, and when you argue, billati hiya ahsan, then argue in the best of ways, with akhlaq. Don't scream and shout. It's the Sunnah of the Prophet. But have we internalized that? وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا, which the ayah she just recited. Are we the Ibad al-Rahman? Who يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا, who walk with humility on earth. وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ, and those who are crass of nature, coarse of heart, غَلِيظُ الْقَوْلِ, etc., etc., those who are barbarous in their outlook, those who are purely rude, to put it bluntly. And if they accost you and speak to you, then say to them, Qalu salama, may peace be upon you. Do we do that? I will advise everyone at the end of this, remind me that in the fast to recite that section of the Surah Furqan, yes, the last 20 or so ayat that leads to the end of the Quran, from there, and I will advise you to recite. All of us don't have the time, people. We are working people, our families today. And I will advise you to recite and to read Surah Hujurat, those two. If you have got no time to do anything else, recite those two. You will learn so much about the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It lasts you 10 lifetimes. If only we have that himmah, that motivation, and that secret talent, that sincerity of searching to internalize these values, then you would have discovered the Sunnah within yourself. And that is important, people. That is more important than anything else that we can dream of. So what is this tariqah? It is the way the Prophet embraced things. We are so fixated, people, on the externals. It drives me insane. I'm at the cold face of this order. I'm not talking to you people as you're sitting here, please. I'm talking about my engagement here, internationally, everywhere. I come across people so fixated. The first thing they look at is what color my amama is. What the devil is this, The Prophet made black amamas, brown ones, green, pink, and all sorts of amamas. What is this all about? They look at, the first thing they look automatically, because they've been enculturated in that way. Haram, at what level do you declare something haram? How many tears do you have to investigate? The maximum the Prophet did was 2 to 3 tears. Whatever goes beyond that is outside your responsibility. When does Dhuhr, for example, set in? We are so obsessed with calculations. Dhuhr sets in that microsecond that it moves across to the west, is it not so? But we're not mukallaf for that microsecond. The Prophet said, if you take the stick, you put it there, and if there's a bit of a shade, it now pushes over to the east, because the sun is going to the west. If it just starts, do you know how far that sun has already moved physically? I mean, in real terms. If that shape moves, then nur is in. That's what you're mukallaf. I prefer to stand on the beach and watch the sun set and say, Allahu Akbar. It's fantastic. I mean, you're doing it in the bosom of nature. So, but today we're okay to watch. Look, I'm not the reaction against these things. I'm just saying, how beautiful it is, the sand, the desert, and everything is. I mean, the canopy of beauty, it's unbelievable. It's just stunning. You feel the presence of Allah Ta'ala under conditions like this. However, just to get on with the talk here, so many of this part of the fiqh of the Sunnah of Muhammad. Let me just give you an idea, okay? A man came to the Prophet, look at his Sunnah, this is his Sunnah, the way in which it treats people. Now, what I try to do is I try to put myself into the position of the Prophet. I try to see how I, as a human being, would respond to something, And often my responses are bizarre, and I've got to readjust them. As I mentioned to so many of us students before at the Zara, when this man comes, I think hectic examples. For example, a man comes to the Prophet and says, "Look, I've accepted Islam. Walakin ana rajul shabak." And please just forgive, there's no shame in Sharia, people, because we're not going to learn English. If we're going to sort of twiddle our fingers about these things and be stupidly ashamed about these things. He came and he says, Shabak, he's a man who has a tremendous desire for women is very strong. And he says, I've accepted everything about Islam, it's a beautiful religion, but would you make one concession for me in the process of my accepting Islam? Because I think you're the most beautiful person I've ever met. Islam is the most beautiful deen I've ever encountered. Would you do one concession for me? Would you allow me to continue with prostitutes and stuff like that? Okay? Now, put yourself into that position. The person comes to you and asks you that question. I mean, our first action, I will slap the guy over. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? SubhanAllah, I'll invoke the curses of the highest heavens and the hells, the 9 hells at the bottom upon you. I mean, that's our response. The Prophet looks at him and says, "Oh, do you have, okay," he says, "do you have sisters and a mother?" And she says, "Yeah, there are lots of sisters and I've got not lots of mothers, but I have lots of sisters and I've got a mother." So I said, "Okay, what if I give permission to someone else to go and whore with your mother and your sisters?" He said, "I'll kill him." So he says, "Let's remember that the woman you want to go lying down with as a brother and a father, who will kill you?" I said, "Oh yeah, it's true, isn't it? Thank you." Can you see the way in which he didn't chase the man away? Just pure hikmah. Just the reverse thing, it's our egotism. He realized that it's this man's ego, and he's fixated on himself. And he's not expanding his horizons. That to the point where his own behavior, would be reprehensible in the eyes of others, universally. But he cannot see that because of his own desires. This is the problem. And do you know how many other? One person came to the Prophet, to Sayyidina Umar, for example, and said to Sayyidina Umar, he committed a crime with a woman, for example. Sayyidina Umar said to him, "Look, when they four witnesses present." And he said, "No, it's nothing, I'm just coming to Iqrar, I'm just coming." And he said, "You weren't prepared to do that?" He said, "No." So he said, count yourself lucky. There were not 4 witnesses there when you did the job, so Allah Ta'ala protected you. Look at the attitudes of these people. You're not exonerated because there's no hukums. There's a hukum of the qadai which we need physical evidence for. But we have the hukum, he's going to be held accountable on the day of Qiyamah. They never overlooked that. So they never became tyrants on earth because they knew that justice will eventually be done in the hukum diyana in the akhirah. That you will be held accountable. But we don't know to what extent you will be held accountable because Allah Ta'ala is Ghafur Rahim. So these are issues people have. And then, because of all of these things, when we speak about the fiqh in its generic sense, then people like Ibn Hajar Asqalani and a whole lot of others, Ibn Ghazali, the stars, the luminaries of our history and our legacy, defined the Sunnah as the fitrah of Allah Ta'ala and the fitrah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's how we define it. Where they quoted the Quran, and Ibn Hajar Asqalani quotes this, yes, lughatan, it means the way of the Prophet, the path. Sal Sabil, seek the way. You know the Sal Sabil, the fountain? Seek the way. Sal means ask. Sabil, the way. Sal Sabil. When you drink from the fountain of Sal Sabil, you drink and you ask for the way. And as I said to my son the other day, if you search for the way and you can't find it, if you keep drinking, the way will find, the path will find you. Okay. And what is the Kawthar? Kawthar comes from the word kathara, meaning abundance, drink abundantly from the spiritual wells of the Kawthar. Okay. Anyway, then he defined it as the fitrah, badl al-fitrah. And he says, والتعبير في بعض الروايات الحديث بالسنة يدل بدل الفطرة يراد بها الطريقة. Those are the words of Al-Hafidh Hajar ibn Asqalani, who is the Sharih of the Fath al-Bari of Imam al-Bukhari. And there is no better Sharih than that. And that is when he says the Prophet عليكم بسنتي وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين. In which way the Sunnah? In the way عليكم بفطرتي, and the fitrah of the Khulafa al-Rashidin. The natural state which they preserved, in which Allah Ta'ala created people. وَلَا تَبْدِيلَ لِخَلْقِ اللَّهِ. And I will mention that ayat. If I don't get all the ayat after time, people can get it from the where Allah Ta'ala says, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا. And so turn your face to the deen, to the true faith, as a hanif, as someone pure, as someone objective, as someone with an open mind and an open heart. That's what hanif means. Hanifan. Fitra, and what is that state of hanif? What is that? Fitratullah lati fatra nas alayha. That is the fitra upon which Allah Ta'ala, fitrat nas, the fitra of people upon which Allah Ta'ala has created you. May the male of us and the female of us be the fitrat nas alayha. Nas, everyone. And Allah Ta'ala says, La tabdila li khalqillah. And there is nothing can change this original state of things. We can, yes, distort and corrupt things and do things, but nothing can change that inherent fitrah. And because of there and that in which our hope lies, that fitrah is there as a given, as an immutable truth, to which we as Muslims, at any time, no matter how dark and how bleak things might be, we can turn to, and that we can tap into that fitrah of Allah Ta'ala, into the fitrah of the universe and the fitrah of ourselves, كل مولود يولد على الفطرة. This is not so. Every person, single human being, is born on his or her fitrah. فأبواه يهودان ونصران ومجوسان. And it's the parents that make them Jewish or Christian or Magian or anything else. And how many of us know that كل مولود يولد على الفطرة? There's a child born a Christian or born a Muslim or Jew, born a Jewish child. Before that person becomes mukallaf and that child dies, where does the child go to? Do we think like this? It's haram for you to say that child is going to Jannah, but do we think like this? Then people want to question me when once I went and I actually carried the beer of the child. They wanted to know why I did that. I was a prefect at the school meeting, and I carried that. Our child was not mukallaf to go. And people went ballistic. I'm carrying a person, a woman, a girl on the fitrah, not mukallaf. And this is the distance, this is the way in which we have the distance that is besieged our ummah in terms of things off in this fitrah. And that is what we need people to internalize in our lives. And what is this transformation that we need to undergo? What is this fitrah and how do we get to that? It is through a process of the nafs. The understanding that we are more ruh with a body than a body with a ruh. And it's how our perspectives are also. The ruh is that which lasts. It's not this body. It's going to rot. It's going to die. It's going to turn to dust. We're not bodies with the ruh, people. We are ruhs with bodies. Because it is more it belongs more to the primordiality of our humanity than anything else. That's what it is. But we are so dunyawi bound, so distracted by so many dunyawi distractions. We've forgotten that truth, that our souls are going to go on. And that's the nafs, and we need to treat that nafs. And how do we treat it? Before we look, La ilaha illallah become haqq ilaha bi anfusihim. Allah Ta'ala will not change that which is our conditions as a society unless we change that which is in ourselves. And how can we do that? We do that through the guidance, once again, of the Quran, which marks the Sunnatullah and the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is why we say we try to emulate the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I've mentioned this before, and I'll go through quickly, and you can get the notes from Sidi Ali al-Khalfi. Number one is what is the what? What nafs is there that besieges us, that holds us hostage, that holds us as prisoners all the time? It's a nafs al-amara bisu. وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي. Can you see what is the greatness of Nabi Yusuf here? With that moment of disturbance between himself and Zulaykha. What is it? فَهَمَّ إِلَيْهَا وَهَمَّتْ إِلَيْهِ فَهَمَّتْ إِلَيْهِ وَهَمَّ إِلَيْهِ. The Quran acknowledges that to the point where the Maymuniyah of the Khawarij actually wanted to remove that, and they don't understand the beauty of it. Wanted to remove that because she was married to another person, but he was, of course, to the wazir or to the king kind of thing. Okay? But there was this attraction between them. But does he deny it? Nabi Yusuf, he doesn't, you see. So he says, وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَعَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. I'm not going to make excuses for my attraction for her. In the nafsa, I am recognizing the fact, and I pay tribute and acknowledge the fact that the nafs is built on wickedness and evil tendencies. You see, you cannot get there if there is no acknowledgement. And so Allah Ta'ala says elsewhere, that's the first stage. Allah Ta'ala says elsewhere, لَا أُقْسِمُ بِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ وَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ اللَّوَّامَةِ. That la there is not a loud negation, it's a loud affirmation. It says, and indeed I swear by Yawm al-Qiyamah, and indeed I swear by the Nafs al-Lawwama. He's elevating the Nafs al-Lawwama, and that is the self-critical Nafs. Where you as a human being has started and are able to look at yourself and criticize yourself. I taught this to my students in the Tazkiyah class at Medina Institute. And it's important that we as people know this, because we cannot go forward without this. And what's the next stage? That doesn't matter to me. Third stage, it is only after lawama, after critical self-scrutiny, that you can really come to peace and terms of yourself. Is it not so? Otherwise you'll never find that peace in yourself. That interior peace, people. Okay? And once you've discovered that peace, all in the Quran. We recite this all the time at janazas. يا أيها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي بابي وادخلي جنتي. We recite this all the time. What is it saying? It says يا أيها النفس المطمئنة. Oh, you nafs address. This is not a statement of fact. This is a dua that we are making for that maid, and people don't know this. I don't know that nafs is mutma'inna. I do not, even less so do I know whether that nafs is radiyah or mardiya. I don't know. What's this mardiya? Beautiful names, you know. Anyway, that nafs mutma'inna, that nafs in the state of serenity. Radiyah, contented with itself with what it has done. The freedom is coming from the heart, in the hearts. But also, in addition to that, it has the contentment of Allah Ta'ala upon it, and that makes it radiyah. There are three nafs mentioned here. And we have the nafs before that also, between some put the mulhama before the mutma'in or vice versa, but it doesn't depend on that. You know, وَنَفْسِ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Once again we have the nafs, and the nafs which created your best of proportions. It's telling us that nafs that lies within you has been creating the best. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We have created the human being in the best of statures and natures. ثُمَّ رَدَنَا. That's the asl is ihsan people. ثُمَّ رَدَنَا وَأَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Sufla means right to the bottom, and then they collapsed and threw them, chucked it down to the lowest. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. That ihsan is the asl people. Ibaha is the asl. We tend to make wickedness the asl, and we tend to make haram the asl nowadays. Everything is mubah, except if there is dalil to make it mustahab, take it further, wajib, or there is a dalil to make it makruh, or to make it haram. You have to have a dalil to take anything out of its state of ibaha, out of its neutral state, because this world has been created in a state of neutrality. And yet that we have forgotten, that vision. These are all the visions, I think, that contribute to our understanding of the Sunnah as a way of being. Because how else can we develop this way? How this qiyam of ourselves, this internal condition, how can we develop it? How can we progress it if we don't understand these things? In the nafs, etc., etc. Okay. So that and we have inspired in that nafs the knowledge of fujur and of taqwa, of evil and of taqwa and of consciousness of Allah Ta'ala. And it is that consciousness that we need to work on, people of Allah Ta'ala. That state of consciousness, to become a muttaqi, for example, to become a muhsin. That is a state of consciousness in which we in fact need to aspire to. Well, so we have these seven, and the last one is the nafs al-kamila, which is of the Prophet. So we have these seven people. Then the nafs al-amara bis-su'u, to be good to yourself, And then we have the nafs al-lawwama, the one that you now criticizing yourself. The nafs al-mutma'inna, that's at peace, at rest with itself. The nafs al-mulhama, the one that is now open to inspirations and all sorts of things. The nafs al-mardiya, that which is contented now with itself. The nafs al-radiya, which is the contented of Allah Ta'ala upon it. And then we have the nafs al-kamila, which is Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which when we speak about emulating the example of the Prophet, we try to aspire to that nafs. And then very few of us can, but at least we can make the effort, to get there. That is nafs al-kamila, because Prophet Muhammad is the archetype. He is the archetype of the nafs al-kamila, of the Torah itself. Out of all human beings who have walked on this, he is the ultimate one who walked on this. If he says, walk the humility on the earth, he is a man who walked with humility upon these particular on this earth. We also have to recognize people that Allah in the Quran, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى وَذَكَّرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ فَصَلَّى. Those of you who are successful, who have purified yourselves, and this is the process of tazkiyah. The nafs is one. It's not different nafs. The nufus, the soul is one. And it's just at different levels, you polishing it, it's not that cleansing it, and so on and so forth. And this is a foundational condition of Islam. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى وَذَكَّرَ رَبَّ رَسْمِهِ فَصَلَّى. Dhikr and tazkiyah. You need to engage much dhikr and much, we need to engage in the process of cleansing and the process of dhikr, which is the way of cleansing our souls and our nafs and things like that. But unfortunately, we prefer the life of this world, and knowing that the akhirah is better for us and more lasting. However, this does not mean that we should turn our backs on it. Allah Ta'ala says, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. There's this kind of balance, people, that we need to look at. Give us the best of the dunya and give us the best of the akhirah. Allah Ta'ala says elsewhere, وَابْتَغِ فِي مَا آتَاكَ اللَّهُ الدَّارُ الْآخِرَةَ وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيا. Allah Ta'ala says, and then pursue that, which you desire, that which Allah Ta'ala has prepared you of the akhirah. But do not forget the nasib, the function here on the dunya. This is the kind of middleness, the balance, people, that we are looking at, and that speaks of equilibrium and justice and universalism and universality. But as I've written here, and I'm actually writing quite extensively on this at the moment, but at once it is located, we have to understand, this understanding of the Sunnah is located in a spiritual moral universe. Understanding of Sunnah is located in what? In a spiritual moral universe. Why? Because we are confusing identities. Nowadays, I would identify a person by the way they dress, for example. Is it right? I can admire this, but is that the ultimate criterion by which I have to judge you? So it's a serious problem. This one old lady was seen walking back and forth to the Masjid and the Salah. Okay? She died and people cried and wailed. And the Prophet said, you are crying about this lady. But when she went on a trip one day, she left her cat, locked up a cat in the room, and the cat died. She's going to press the wine in Jahannam. And then there is the story of this prostitute, as we know, who had died. And everyone celebrated when she died. And the Prophet said that she will go directly to Jannah. Why? Because she gave a dog water on the day that, all of its fasts were done. You have no. What are we talking about? We're talking about the Sunnah people. Have we internalized? Do we do that? Have we reached that stage of spiritual, moral ethics, that level that qualifies us for Jannah in that particular way? So don't judge by the Vahid people. We have become exoterists. It doesn't mean that we should neglect them. I'm not asking you to go streak down the roads of people. SubhanAllah. That's ridiculous. What I'm saying is a question of priority. How do we prioritize our Islam? Because we cannot prioritize our Iman, our Ihsan, nor the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu. We need to ask ourselves very critically, what is Muslim identity? Muslim identity is not one of nationalism, and it's got nothing to do with ethnicity and things like that. It's got nothing to do with the color of the skin or the clothes you wear and stuff like that. Ethnicity, identity has got nothing to do essentially with that. It is one, on the other hand, of ethics and spirituality. And remember that our identity lies solely in the hands and the eyes of Allah. That's where our identity is located. In the hands of Allah. And remember that. And therefore Allah extols the beauty of cultural diversity, the beauty of natural diversity. It's the artistry of Allah. And He'll look at all the time. And that's of course another thing. And one that we need to appreciate and learn from. And there's so many stories about traveling through the earth, Allah Ta'ala telling us this and that and the other. And what happens with this is, with this kind of internalization of the culture of Islam and of the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu, it takes us to a completely different level. Once we have gone through that training of the nafs, we come to Islam as not just something that I do between myself and Allah, salah, and pray, give zakat, and go on Hajj. But I start to understand Islam in the far, bigger picture. The panorama of Islam, the landscape of Islam increases, to the point where I start to understand. Allah Ta'ala tells me, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. Then these things start to make sense to me. I will show them our ayat and their horizons. وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. Until it becomes manifest to you that He is the truth. What are you looking at when you're looking at your horizons? What are you looking at when you're looking فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ at your nafs and amara bisu? You'll never find Allah Ta'ala there with the nafs and amara bisu. If you have not undergone the necessary spiritual training, cleansing, purification, if you have not undergone that, if you have not internalized that Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu revolutionized the world in its ethics, in its spirituality, revolutionized the world. 250 million today are Muslim people. Can you imagine the impact that man has made in history? A quarter billion people of this world, a quarter rather of world population is Muslim. That's the impact this man has made. But we need to harness and we need to recapture and we need to re-excavate the best of what that man has left behind. And most of it is in his akhlaq. وَمَا بُئِثْتُ إِلَّا لِيُتِمَّ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. And I have not been sent except to perfect the akhlaq of people. And that is the ultimate Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is what we've got to internalize. And these are the transformations that we need to undergo. And that will lead, and I will conclude on this, to our consciousness of Islam as a civilization of oneness. It is a civilization of oneness. And I will end off on 7 points. And some of these points have been made out of the bucket in civilizational dialogue. Number one, we've got to realize that we are, as human beings, that we have a common human ancestry. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من نفس واحدة. Even more pertinent. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من نفس واحدة وخلقنا منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله and so on and so on. The important point is that Allah tells Ya Nas, O people, it doesn't say O Mu'minin, Mu'minat, and so on and so on. It says Ya Nas, Inna Khalaqna Nas. We have created you from a single essence. And from that single essence we brought male and female, and from that male and female we spread humanity. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ. So have taqwa in Allah Ta'ala about whom you have so many questions for us. Wal arham, and the wombs that bore you, mothers. Do we have taqwa on one level with Allah Ta'ala and the women, mothers who bore us in the wombs? There's a common human ancestry, people. Humanity is also common. It's a common humanity. We all feel and think and experience things. And therefore, when we approach other people with our deen, we do so in a manner that best portrays the humanity that Islam has come with. We have to also believe, thirdly, in the essential goodness of people. Kullu mawludin yulad al-fitra, as I said earlier. The fourth one, that in the acknowledgement that divine favors are universal and are undeceived. Quran is repeat to that, telling us that the favors I give you, material favors, are not exclusive to Muslims people. So I'm going to look at the technology of Americans and say because of that Allah Ta'ala has favored them over us or over anyone else. No, people. These people can become barbarians overnight. What happened to Germany, Nazi Germany, when they thought they had the power to conquer the world. Let's face it, people. The worst of things can happen. But favors, material, are meted out equally to everyone. We also have to root that consciousness in the fact that there is a profound wisdom behind the diversity and the plurality of the world. It's wisdom behind the difference in difference, and the plurality that surrounds us. And that number 6, that there is a global social conscience rooted in mercy and justice. Mercy and justice are amongst the most often used words in the Quran. And Allah is the most used word in the Quran for one. Ilm is the second most used word in the Quran. Justice is the third most used word in the Quran. I mean, there's a triad upon which, Islam is spoken. And then we have, as people, just generally, we have a common responsibility towards that character. Now, so it is imperative for us people that we identify these points of reference for especially Islamic education. When we educate ourselves about this, when we talk about the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we talk about anything with regard to Islam, that we hold in mind that there is a holistic vision that Islam has, whether it is regarding the individual as such, whether it is regarding society, whether it regards the content of reality, within which we live, both material and spiritual. And I will end up for this advice to us, that there are 4 things upon which I think believe that the worldview of Islam is in fact based. Number 1, that the worldview of Islam is in fact based. Number 1, that it is based on the unity of knowledge. It is always one. And that describes the oneness of our civilization. Okay? Like Rabbana Atina Fid Dunya Hasana wa Fil Akhirah, attention between dunya and the akhirah, describes the nature of the dunya that we have to confront, the challenges and the tension that we have to confront. However, the worldview is based on the unity of knowledge that Allah, on the knowledge of Allah Ta'ala, on Tawheed, the oneness of Allah Ta'ala. And number two, on the servitude of people to Allah Ta'ala, our ubudiyah. Never forget that we are the Ibad Rahman who need to walk with humility on the earth. We are the Ibad Rahman. And Allah Ta'ala elsewhere says we ibadah, ubudiyah, but we are not just the Ibad of Allah Ta'ala. We have also men and women being said as the Khulafa of Allah Ta'ala. Inni ja'ili fil ardi khalifatan. And then the Malaika object and say, are you going to place him onto this world? Those who used to demand, shed blood, and Allah said, I know better than what you know. That is what distinguishes us from the Malaika. And then he taught the Adam the names of all things. That intellect Allah Ta'ala has given us. That intellect we need to introspect and retrospect and inspect and think about and use in the way which Allah Ta'ala desires us to use it. So we are both Ibad and Khalifa. If you forget that you are the Khalifa of Allah Ta'ala, you become a rather painful slave, rather lacking in confidence, miserable human being, despairing human being, like a slave, which Allah does not require of us. Under the worst of circumstances, we've got to retain a sense of optimism, a sense of confidence. وَلَا تَقْنِطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Never despair of the rahmah of Allah Ta'ala, never. How do we do that? By not forgetting that we are the vicegerency Allah Ta'ala has given us as Khulafa of Allah Ta'ala. That we are also the Khulafa. Under all circumstances, we have a duty to act out our roles as Khulafa of Allah Ta'ala, the male of us and the female of us here on this earth. On the contrary, if you forget your ubudiyah, like it happens in so many of our Muslim countries, unfortunately, then you become entitled. If you think that there was everything which is in the world, and we have subjected everything in the earth, if you forget your ubudiyah in that condition of taskhir, you become entitled in your aspect as a Khalifa, because you have forgotten your ubudiyah. So as Muslims, we need a balance between being Ibad Rahman, between our ubudiyah, our bondsmanship to Allah Ta'ala on the one hand, and our the khilafah, that responsibility of vicegerency that Allah Ta'ala has given us here on earth. We need that balance. Under the tawheed and our understanding of the oneness of Allah Ta'ala, oneness in all its manifestations, and oneness in all its diversity. Because we are, as Muslims, we need to deal with diversity, and at the end of the day, people, we should not forget that if there is anything that needs to be central in our lives, it is the centrality of revelation. And that is what distinguishes us from each and every other system, that we believe in the centrality of revelation of the Wahdi people. But it is our duty as the Ibad of Allah Ta'ala, as the Khulafa of Allah Ta'ala, under the knowledge and certain knowledge of the oneness. I'm not talking about the unity of Allah Ta'ala. I'm talking about the unicity and the oneness of Allah Ta'ala, that we enact our roles as both Ibad and as the Khulafa of Allah Ta'ala, bearing in mind that the Sunnah needs to be internalized and needs to become a living part of our characters, in our conduct, in the manner of behavior. Have we expelled the awsaf and madmuma from our hearts, the takhliya, like kibr, hasad, jealousy, hatred, malice, belligerence, all of these terrible qualities, and have we adorned it by a process of takhliya and tahliya? Have we adorned our hearts with gentleness, with kindness, with clemency, with fairness, with justice? Have we embraced those sunnic qualities and attributes of the Prophet Muhammad to the point where it has become a way of being for us, a way of conduct, a way of being in this world, so that is the treasure that we take with us over into the Akhirah, and not the wealth and everything else and material things that are accumulated. That will stay behind you. But what will go over will be that ruh of ours, that nafs, that soul. And beware of what condition and what state that soul is in when it transfers from this dunya and that. And the day, inshallah, when they recite the Romain, I hope to be with me. how to be right, and also the rest of the show. And that can only be as a result if I have made the Sunnah the way of being for myself. And that is in tandem with the Prophet, this aspect of إِنَّكَ لَعَلَىٰ خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. We have to take the best of standards. You can see that standard people that we are right. I'm not going to lay you are 2 inches out and throw one up. Okay? Allah Ta'ala alam bisawab. He says he's been telling us I'm giving 10 minutes. I'll give me 11 or 10 minutes.
I tried to make some points, my pen was dry, so when you pen? Dry pen. I just noticed 2 or 3 points here. One is that human being in Arabic, the very word human being is insan, from nasiya, from to forget. It means to err, to make mistakes. That the human being is someone who will differ, who is not perfect. And we can't expect people to be perfect. We need to deal with people as human beings. I will err, you will err. We will think differently, we are different. Another thing is that that hierarchy, there is a spiritual hierarchy shared between the human being and Allah. And that spiritual hierarchy is can make the janitor or the street sweeper a better Muslim than the PhD professor because he is a better human being. There is no social hierarchy, it's a spiritual, secret hierarchy which we share between ourselves and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then there's also difference of opinion. Do you know that if I say that in the Hanafi, according to Abu Hanifa, in the madhab of Abu Hanifa, that if I were to say that the Surah Fatiha is not a fard in Salah, probably you're going to kick me out of here. Because we all are brought up with the Fatiha is a rukun of the Salah. But is there any verse in the Quran saying that you must read the Fatiha in the Salah? Probably not going to find it. I don't think so. So you have to go to another source of law, which is the Sunnah. So Abu Hanifa doesn't make the Fatiha a fard, he makes it a rukun, he makes it a wajib, he makes it a wajib. These differences we need to be aware of. Let me not even say woman reading Salah and stuff, which is probably going to keep me further out of the mosque. But I'm sure even Taymiyyah even says that, eh? So there's a lot of differences, and the foundation of all of this is Rahmah. And I'll just mention one thing, something beautiful I picked up in Arabic, is that when we read Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which this deen is founded on mercy and compassion, is that there is an elision, ellipsis before in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. So keep that in mind. That verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, actually, without the words there, is saying the entire creation, cosmos, this entire dunya and akhirah, everything, it is in the name, it is because of the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, Rahman ar-Rahim. So when we read Bismillah, keep in mind, according to Ibn Arabi, there is a vision there that we are, the entire cosmos is in the name of mercy and compassion. And one thing I left out earlier is that the importance of this being, not just for men living, but for men and women as human beings, is that ummah, from mother, is because the woman plays such a central role in any society, because she is Halim. And Halim is forbearance or giving that milk of humankind. So therefore she is Halima, for taking the orphan, the blessed orphan, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's the importance and the sacredness of women. And societies will only grow if we recognize that. So I'll stop there, and we thank you as Islamic text on behalf of Islamic text for honoring us and gracing us with your presence here today. And hopefully we have many more, inshallah. And do you want to say something? Afterwards, okay. We have the salawat, the short salawat from Sidi Ibrahim, and then we're going to have a group photo outside. So if we can move immediately after the salawat, before I think the adhan goes, just take a group photo upstairs here. We can move immediately after the salawat. And then after the salawat, I think Imam Ismail will just do a short dua. صلى الله على محمد
الله